Some stories do not begin with miracles. They begin with endings. They begin when hope is fading like the last light slipping behind the horizon, too dim to chase, too important to let go. Some stories begin when life is almost over and still somehow manages to change everything left behind. This story begins with two souls who had already been given up on, a girl whose time was measured in weeks instead of years, and a filly born broken, already marked for death before she ever learned the meaning of living. No one knew that their lives were about to intertwine in a way that would reshape everyone who witnessed it. No one expected the choice made that day to echo far beyond the final breath. It happened at a small rescue tucked deep into the valley near the eastern ridge, where the winters were brutal and summers smelled of pine and dust. The place wasn't much more than weathered wood and rusted gates, held together by volunteers with hands calloused from work that never ended. Horses came there when the world no longer wanted them, old, injured, forgotten, abandoned. Most healed, some didn't. All deserved a chance. But in a small isolation pen near the back pasture stood a filly unlike any the rescue had ever seen, a tiny chestnut with a white blaze across her face, legs twisted from birth, spine curved like a crooked branch. She could barely stand without trembling, and every attempt to walk sent her collapsing into the dirt. She had been born from a mare who died soon after delivery, and without nursing, care, or hope, the world decided nature had made its choice. She was scheduled for euthanasia that coming Monday. Her paperwork was already signed. Her purpose was already dismissed. She had never known a hand that didn't hurt, never known a voice that didn't speak of pity, never known touch that wasn't followed by needles, straps, or restraint. She didn't know how to trust. She didn't know how to love. She didn't know that someone was coming who would change everything. Miles away, in a hospital room, where the scent of antiseptic clung to the air and machines, beeped steady reminders of time slipping away. A girl of 12 lay beneath blankets printed with faded stars. Her name was Emily, though most called her Em. Her hair, once long and sun-colored, now lay in thin wisps against her pillow, loosened by months of treatment that promised hope and delivered disappointment. Her hands were small and pale, threaded with IV lines that looked too heavy for wrists so delicate. The doctors had stopped promising anything. Her parents had stopped asking. Hope had become something too painful to hold. But Em asked for one thing before the world grew quiet. She asked to see horses just one more time, not because she had ever owned one, not because she had ever ridden, but because horses had always made her feel the way nothing else could, quiet on the inside, like the storm paused, like the noise in her head fell silent and the ache in her bones loosened its grip. She said she wanted to see them before she left. The ambulance drove slowly down the gravel road to the rescue facility, tires crunching softly as if trying not to disturb the land. Nurses walked beside her wheelchair, parents close behind, hands gripping handles like holding on might stop time. The sky overhead was cloudless and pale, winter sun hanging low like a weakened lantern. Breath showed white in the air, and the horizon shimmered with frost. When they rolled Em through the main barn, horses leaned over stall doors, curious eyes following her movement. Soft snorts filled the quiet, warm breath rising like clouds. Volunteers stepped back, giving space as if sensing something sacred unfolding. But one horse did not come to see her. One horse did not stretch a neck or flick an ear. One horse stood alone, trembling in the far pen, eyes wild and distant, body refusing contact the way a burned hand refuses flame. Her name, given only for paperwork, was Willow, unwanted, unrecoverable, assigned no future. M's wheelchair stopped before the small pasture gate, and time stopped with it. Willow froze at the sight of her, not with fear, but with recognition, as if something ancient stirred beneath ribs that had only known suffering. Her ears quivered. Her nostrils flared. Her trembling stilled, replaced by something sharp and focused. The volunteers watched with dread, expecting the filly to bolt or collapse in panic. Her history said she would. Her body said she couldn't handle more. Instead, Willow took one trembling step. Her twisted front leg shook violently, threatening to buckle, but she lifted the other. Then another. Step by fragile step, she crossed the pasture, each movement an act of defiance against every prediction and every piece of paper that declared her hopeless. Her breath came sharp and fast, but her eyes never left the girl. M lifted a thin hand toward her, palm open, fingers shaking. Willow lowered her head and touched it gently, and the world changed. The filly's shaking stopped instantly, as if someone placed warm hands around her heart. Her eyes softened, her breath slowed, her muscles relaxed into stillness deeper than sedation had ever offered. The child's shoulders loosened as though pain lifted from bone. A soundless understanding passed between them, a conversation without words, a connection without explanation. No one moved, no one breathed. Tears slipped silently down the faces of her parents, volunteers, even hardened rescue workers who had learned long ago not to cry over every tragedy. The girl leaned forward, resting her forehead against the filly's, and for the first time in months, she smiled, a real smile. Soft, peaceful, full. The sun warmed their faces. Wind carried the scent of hay through the air. Somewhere far away, a hawk cried across the valley sky. For a long time they stayed like that, perfectly still, one too broken to stand, one too weak to live, and yet in that moment they held each other upright. Something inside Willow healed that moment, not bone, not tendon, not muscle, but the part of the soul that decides whether life is worth trying for. Something inside M softened too, the fear, the anger, the loneliness that shadows dying children. When Willow finally stepped back, she looked stronger, taller, alive, and in M's eyes, a calm settled so deep it silenced the machines around her. As they wheeled her away, the filly whinnied, a long, aching sound that rose into the sky like prayer. No one who heard it forgot, because everyone knew the truth. Two broken hearts just found the only thing powerful enough to hold them together, and one of them was already running out of time. Winter settled deeper into the valley in the days that followed, snow drifting against fence lines and collecting in quiet white folds across the hills. Time moved differently after that meeting, slower, heavier, as though the world held its breath, afraid to disrupt something delicate and sacred that had taken root the moment the filly touched the girl's hand. Emily returned to the hospital, her body growing weaker with each passing day. Walking became too difficult, talking too exhausting, breathing too heavy, yet her eyes carried a light that hadn't been there before, a softness, a peace, a quiet warmth that radiated from some place untouched by pain. She asked every morning how the filly was doing. She asked every night if they would visit again, but her body was failing faster than hope could outrun. Meanwhile, back at the rescue, something unexplainable unfolded. Willow, the filly once too broken to stand, began to change. The volunteers saw it first. She stood at the pasture fence for hours, staring down the long gravel road leading out of the facility as though waiting for someone she knew would return. She refused to eat unless facing that direction, her ears focused intently forward, listening to something nobody else could hear. The trembling that once racked her body faded replaced by steady breath and calm eyes. She nickered softly whenever the wind shifted, a quiet sound filled with longing instead of fear. And every day at the same time, just after sunrise, she paced the pen in uneven circles, pausing once at the gate before lowering her head as if bowing. The vets couldn't explain it. The staff couldn't explain it. No one tried to interrupt it. Something in her had awakened, something beyond biology or logic. The rescue director walked the length of her stall daily, watching her movements with confusion and awe. The twisted legs still looked fragile, joints still misaligned, spine still curved wrong. The x-rays insisted she should barely stand. The papers still dated her euthanasia appointment, but nature no longer agreed. Willow was fighting. Not to survive, but to hold on, as though she knew time was slipping away for the one soul who had ever touched her without fear. News traveled quietly through the rescue circle. Volunteers whispered in break rooms, hands still shaking from nights holding animals that refused to let go. Parents watched from hospital chairs, counting breaths instead of hours. Nurses softened when Emily's eyes lit up at the mention of the filly's name. The valley itself seemed to move under a hush of reverence. One more visit was arranged. The ambulance rolled up the long gravel drive once again, wheels crunching softly in the quiet morning. Frost clung to the windows like fragile lace. Emily's parents walked beside the gurney now instead of pushing a wheelchair, their hands trembling, gripping railings, as though holding on might stop time from slipping further. Willow heard the engine before it crested the hill. She lifted her head sharply, ears pricking forward, tail flicking once in recognition. Her muscles tightened beneath scarred skin, and she stepped toward the gate with urgency that ignored pain entirely. Volunteers watched, breath trapped in chests, phones forgotten in pockets. Emily was lowered gently beside the pasture fence, bundled beneath blankets, oxygen humming softly. Her eyes fluttered open and found Willow, and something inside both of them sparked, a connection reignited with instant clarity. Willow limped forward, slower this time, each step heavy, intentional, reverent. The girl lifted her thin hand once more, fingers trembling in the cold air. The filly pressed her muzzle against her palm. The world stood still. Snowflakes drifted silently through the air, melting against Em's cheeks like warm tears. Sunlight broke through clouds, spilling gold over the frost-covered ground. Willow lowered herself carefully into the straw beside the girl, a movement vets swore she could not perform, curling her small body protectively around the gurney. Emily rested her head against the filly's neck, eyes closing, breath slowing, chest rising gently against warm fur. And for the first time in weeks, the machines monitoring her pulse fell into a steady rhythm, not chaotic, not strained, peaceful. Her mother covered her mouth, body shaking. Her father bowed his head, hands gripping the rail so tight his knuckles blanched white. The nurses stepped back, tears streaming freely. No one wanted to break the moment. No one dared speak. No one looked away. Two broken lives held each other together as though the world outside no longer existed. When the paramedics finally returned her to the ambulance, Emily whispered something through lips barely moving, a breath shaped like gratitude, like goodbye, like freedom. Willow watched them disappear down the long gravel road. She stayed at the gate long after the sirens faded behind the ridge. She stayed until the sun fell behind the mountains and night poured across the valley. And when darkness settled completely, she lowered her head and cried, a low, trembling sound that no one had ever heard from a horse before. A sound that carried across the open fields like a grieving lullaby. The next morning the call came. Emily was gone. The world grew unbearably still. At the rescue, Willow stood motionless in her pasture, head bowed to the frozen ground, refusing to move, refusing to eat, refusing to lift her eyes. The trembling returned, stronger than before, but this time not from pain, from loss. Volunteers tried everything: feed, warmth, medicine, touch, but nothing reached her. She stood like a statue carved from heartbreak, body shrinking, breath shallow, as though ready to follow the girl who had given her meaning. Days passed, nights blurred into mornings, hope thinned. Some said animals didn't understand death. Some said grief was human alone. They were wrong, because Willow knew. She felt it in the silence. She felt it in the space where a small hand had once rested. She felt it in every heartbeat weakening inside her chest. Two souls had touched. One had let go, the other couldn't. And just when loss felt final, when the world accepted another ending, something happened that no one could explain. Something that would change everything left behind. Grief settled over the rescue barn like winter fog, thick and silent, swallowing sound, dulling color, bending light, until everything felt muted and far away. The volunteers moved quietly now, their footsteps soft on the concrete floor, their voices barely above whispers. No one wanted to disturb the heavy ache hanging in the air. Willow stood in the far pasture, motionless, untouched by the world around her. Snow collected on her back, but she did not shake it off. Wind tugged at her mane, but she did not lift her head. The water bucket froze solid overnight because she never approached it. Even the other horses kept their distance, sensing a depth of sorrow no instincts could reach. Days passed, then more, and weakness hollowed her body until her ribs showed like fragile branches beneath thin skin. Her breath grew slow and uneven. Her legs trembled without movement. She no longer cried. She no longer had strength to. The rescue vet examined her and stepped away with haunted eyes. There was no medical reason left to fight. Her body was giving up. The spark that once lit her from within had vanished. Some whispered that she was dying of heartbreak. Others whispered that she was following Emily. As the sun dropped behind the ridge that evening, painting the world in bruised shades of purple and rose, a single star appeared in the sky earlier than it should have, bright, unmoving, strangely low. One of the volunteers noticed and shivered, unable to say why. Night settled gently, snow falling in soft, spiraling flakes that turned the pasture into a field of white feathers. The barn lights dimmed. Horses rustled in their stalls. The world slowed to a hush. Just before midnight, Willow's head lifted, as if someone called her name through the silence. Her ears pricked sharply forward. Her eyes widened, not with panic, but recognition. She exhaled once, a long trembling breath that steamed into the frigid air like smoke rising from warm earth. For the first time in days, she moved. She took one step, then another, then a third. Her legs bowed and shook violently beneath her weight, but something unseen held her upright. The trembling steadied. Muscles tightened, not with fear, but purpose. Her breath deepened, chest expanding with life returning where only emptiness had lived. Suddenly, with a force no one believed possible, Willow bolted toward the arena gate, breaking into a run so powerful the snow exploded beneath her hooves like white fire. Volunteers woke to the sound of pounding hooves, rushing to the windows in disbelief as the impossible unfolded before their eyes. The filly who could not walk without collapsing, the filly whose body was twisted, and failing the filly scheduled to be put down, was running. Flying, her stride stretched long and flawless, legs straightening as if reshaped by invisible hands. The wind lifted her mane like wings, and every muscle moved with precision and grace, no science could measure. She moved like a creature carved from starlight, guided by something beyond flesh and bone. She wasn't alone. In the center of the arena, snow swirled in a soft spiral, forming the faint outline of a small shape running beside her, a gentle silhouette, child-sized, made of breath and memory, visible only for a heartbeat, but undeniable. Willow raced with her head high, her voice breaking into the night in a triumphant, echoing whinny that rolled across the valley like thunder and prayer entwined. The sound shook the barn rafters, woke birds from their perches, and filled the night sky with something electric and holy. The volunteers stood frozen, tears streaming freely, hands over mouths, unable to speak. For a full minute she ran, strong, beautiful, unstoppable, the arena lights flickering, as if bending to the presence that moved beside her. Snow glowed under her hooves, the wind sang through the rails, the earth itself seemed to hold its breath. Then, as suddenly as it began, she slowed. She trotted once in a perfect circle. She stopped in the center of the ring. She lifted her head toward the star that still burned low over the ridge, brighter now, pulsing like a heartbeat. She exhaled one soft breath into the freezing air, and gently, silently, she laid down. When the volunteers reached her, she was gone, her body still warm, her face peaceful, eyes closed as though she had simply fallen into a dream. No struggle, no fear, no pain, just release, just freedom. Just the quiet miracle of a life completed. They buried her at sunrise at the edge of the pasture, beneath the old cottonwood tree, where horses often stood to rest in summer shade. Fresh snow covered the ground like white silk, and the wind was still as velvet. Her headstone was simple, a smooth piece of river stone engraved with her name and nothing more, Willow. And below it, she ran home. The star that had hovered low in the sky faded with the morning light. Some said it disappeared. Some said it followed her. No one argued that something extraordinary happened that night. Over the weeks that followed, Emily's mother visited often, standing silent beneath the tree with hands wrapped around the stone, breath trembling in cold air. She said she felt peace there, not sorrow. She said she felt presence, not emptiness. She said she felt Emily's laughter in the wind. The rescue rebuilt itself around that miracle. Donations poured in. New horses came through gates that once closed in fear. Volunteers spoke softly of the night the filly ran, each remembering it differently, all remembering it clearly. And every year on the anniversary of Emily's passing, at the exact moment snow first touches the ground, a single horse in the rescue would lift its head suddenly and whinny into the wind, long, strong, defiant, echoing the sound that changed everything. Some stories end with goodbye, some stories end with loss, but this one ends with something else, proof that love does not leave when bodies do, proof that souls do not vanish when hearts stop beating, proof that the bonds we choose are stronger than time. Some miracles do not roar, some do not shine, some do not appear with thunder, some move quietly, some move gently. Some move in silence, just beyond sight, guiding broken feet into one last run beneath the stars. And when they do, nothing in the world remains the same. Love doesn't end. It changes shape. It becomes wind, memory, breath, motion, the force that lifts us when we can no longer stand. Hold close the ones who walk beside your soul. Feel deeply. Choose kindness, and when you must say goodbye, remember. The heart never lets go, not truly, not ever. Somewhere just beyond the edge of what we understand, they are still running.